At this point, you've now read the first several chapters of Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights. And so now we're going to take a minute to kind of travel back and cover some of that contextual information, that background knowledge that we really need to understand this novel. So go ahead and take out your notes from last class, and I'm going to walk through this PowerPoint with you and give you some information that I think will help you to better understand this novel. So first, Wuthering Heights is considered a work of Gothic literature. And when we hear the word Gothic, we often think kind of a form of dress. We think of, the all-black kind of goth stereotype. But that actually is very different from what we mean when we talk about Gothic literature. And so today we're first going to cover Gothic literature, and then we'll jump into the Byronic hero, which is a key part of Gothic literature. So, Gothic literature is a form of literature in which events take the reader from the reasoned order of the everyday world into the dark and dreadful world of the supernatural. So really at its core, Gothic literature is very dark, very dreary, very ominous, and it's dealing quite a bit with supernatural elements. So, we're kind of getting into the monsters, Frankenstein, Dracula, all that stuff. That really is Gothic literature at its core. This type of literature was very popular in the late 18th and 19th centuries, and that's about the same time that Romanticism was really taking off as well, and we'll get into that on the next couple of slides. And so for reference, Wuthering Heights was written in 1847, so really right in the middle of Gothic literature. Gothic literature also depicts settings with a disquieting, mysterious atmosphere. So we are going to see a lot of settings, and in fact we already have seen a lot of settings that are very eerie, very creepy. It's dark. The moors of England, which is where Wuthering Heights is set, they give us the creeps, It's very ominous, and you're going to see that throughout the novel. These settings are creepy. They kind of give you chills. Other common elements of Gothic novels include mysterious castles, so again, that very mysterious, kind of creepy atmosphere. Supernatural events, you're going to see that all over the place. Lots of things that are slightly supernatural. The characters are going to try to explain them away, but there is something just slightly off, slightly otherworldly about Gothic literature. Extreme outbursts of emotion, you'll see that all over the place. Heathcliff, Catherine, all these characters really cannot control their emotions, particularly Heathcliff. You will see him just absolutely lose his mind, and he will be furious one second and joyful the next second. But that inability to control one's emotions is very characteristic of Gothic literature. Gloom, horror, again, these are elements of Gothic literature, Gothic settings. A woman in distress, we're going to see that quite a bit in Wuthering Heights. Catherine is oftentimes, just the quintessential woman in distress. Suspense, omens, an omen is like a bad sign, a sign that something bad is going to happen. So kind of like foreshadowing a bit. And then lastly, disturbing dreams. That's another big characteristic of Gothic literature. Of course, we've already seen disturbing dreams in Wuthering Heights in those first couple of chapters. So dreams will play a very interesting role in this novel, so be on the lookout as you annotate this novel for disturbing, creepy, ominous dreams. Before we move on, I do want to show you a picture of this manor from northern England. This is Harlexton Manor, and this is actually where I studied abroad when I was in college. It's about 2 hours north of London. Harlexton Manor is really just the picture-perfect traditional Gothic manor. When you think of Gothic literature, when you're thinking about the setting and what the manor might look like, you could picture something like this. Harlexton Manor, the one pictured here, was built in 1837, so that's just 10 years before Wuthering Heights was published. Now, Harlexton looks quite a bit older than that because Harlexton, you can kind of tell by the architecture, is inspired by early Renaissance architecture. So if you know anything about art or architecture, that would be like Baroque or Elizabethan architecture. It is architecture that's very ornate, it's over the top, It's beautiful and stunning and just incredible to look at. And that was a time period when people were trying to build buildings that just displayed this incredible outpouring of emotion. They were magnificent. They were kind of eerie. They had little secret passageways and trapdoors. And that's all very characteristic of Gothic literature. So this manor, you might call it a castle, but it is a manor, is what you might picture when you're thinking about the setting of a traditional Gothic novel. It's huge, it's ornate, it's kind of creepy, it's mysterious, there are secret passageways, it's just really grand. So the last thing I want to talk about in terms of the Gothic literature movement is its connection to Romanticism. Now, you should remember Romanticism from last year when you studied American literature. Romanticism was that movement in literature that was all about emotion and imagination and the power of nature. So think like Walden. You all, I think, read that last year. It's a work of literature that just thrives on emotion and the beauty of nature and really letting your emotion guide you and not focusing so much on logic or reason. So Gothic literature, as I said, was born out of this Romantic movement, and so there are a lot of similarities between Gothic literature and Romanticism because really those two movements in literature were going on at about the same time. Gothic literature is just a subset of Romanticism. And that last bullet there says that Gothic and Romantic literature both demonstrate that there are some things that science and reason just cannot explain. And that is key to understanding both Gothic literature and Romanticism. They thrive on imagination and intuition, and they really acknowledge the idea that science is not everything. Now we're going to move into discussing the Byronic hero. The Byronic hero is a type of hero that was created by the Romantic poet Lord Byron. So he was writing in the Romantic and the Gothic era. And Lord Byron was an interesting guy. He was a poet and he was a little bit crazy. He was definitely a bit of a ladies' man, a little bit promiscuous, and he was once said to be mad, bad, and dangerous to know. So when you think Lord Byron, I want you to think of that quote, mad, bad, and dangerous to know. He was a little bit crazy. And that quote, mad, bad, and dangerous to know, really characterizes the Byronic hero, which was inspired by and created by Lord Byron. A Byronic hero is a nonconformist who rebels against the norms of society. So it's a huge rebel. Byronic heroes, even though they're called heroes, they are certainly no one you would look up to. They're typically arrogant, very, very intelligent, but also impulsive and a bit unstable. They're emotionally and psychologically complex. Byronic heroes are not good, they're not kind, they're not good leaders, and they do not typically get a happy ending. So it's a hero, yes, but not a hero in the traditional sense. Byronic heroes possess great talent, yet also a great ego. So you're going to see that Byronic heroes, again, they're very arrogant. They think that they are all that, and they are not afraid to kind of flaunt their talents. Byronic heroes are also typically in exile, meaning they are isolated from society. Byronic heroes lack respect for rank or privilege, and you're going to see that in Wuthering Heights. Heathcliff, our Byronic hero, he really doesn't conform to society. He doesn't agree with these divisions in social class. Byronic heroes typically dislike society, government, and social institutions. So again, they are huge rebels. Typically, you're going to see that a Byronic hero has something mysterious in his or her past. And Heathcliff, as we know, is an orphan. We don't know where he came from, so he does have that mysterious past that we don't quite understand. And then lastly, Byronic heroes are ultimately very self-destructive. They are their own worst enemy, and they do something to cause their own downfall. So now that I've described a Byronic hero, the question really is, why is a Byronic hero even a hero at all? It sounds quite a bit like a villain. And the answer to that is that Byronic heroes do have values and a moral code. They're not all bad. So Heathcliff in Wuthering Heights, for example, he is not a villain. And Byronic heroes are not villains, even though it seems like they are. They are heroes, ultimately. Because with Byronic heroes, there is some line that the Byronic hero will not cross. They are not totally bad or totally evil. They do have a moral code. It's just different from our moral code. And so that's why Byronic heroes ultimately are heroes, because at the end of the day, they do have a moral code, and we are rooting for them in some sense. Despite the fact that Heathcliff is a truly awful person at certain points in the novel, we are rooting for him, and we do want him to succeed and get Catherine in the end. So now we've reached the end of our notes on Gothic literature and the Byronic hero. And there are a couple of questions on your notes sheet that we really haven't gotten to yet. So after this video ends, I want you to spend a couple of minutes with your partner talking about two questions. The first one is, what are some examples of modern Byronic heroes? There are Byronic heroes everywhere. A great example of a Byronic hero is Edward Cullen from Twilight. He is, an individual who isolates himself. He has a bit of a different moral code than most people do. He is kind of dark, mysterious. There's something in his past that he's hiding. Most people wouldn't consider him a good or a kind person. He's very intelligent. He's emotionally complex. And so he really fits that Byronic hero mold. So first, talk about that. What are some modern Byronic heroes? And then second, what are some examples of Gothic literature? Of course, we've talked about Wuthering Heights, and then you've got, Frankenstein, Dracula, but perhaps you can think of some other ones, or maybe some modern works of literature that kind of fit that Gothic mold that we've talked about. So with that, go ahead and talk about those two questions with your partner, and I hope that this information in this video was helpful to you as we continue our study of Wuthering Heights.